This is a guide of how to become fluent in Japanese starting now. After investing a significant amount of time searching and refining my method, last year I developed a comprehensible, easy-to-follow daily routine for learning Japanese. Now, I'm not claiming to have discovered a magic trick. Many of these tools may be repetitive and well-known for those already in the learning process, so I'm not saying I'm the author, and I won't attach a name to this method. It's simply what I will do based on research and experience, and I'm confident that it will lead me to fluency with the right amount of time invested. If you're interested, I'll walk you through all the aspects of this daily routine. Whether you like it or feel lost, perhaps you can give it a try. And no, I don't have a JLPTN1 certificate, nor do I plan to get one. What I can say is that I treat Japanese and language learning like any other skill. It's a process that, though different depending on the skill, can be replicated with some adjustments. And we all love getting new skills and learning new things. This actually led me to graduate as a doctor 8 years ago, then become an illustrator and concept artist for the video game industry, while learning English and French in the process. Hopefully that doesn't sound in any way pretentious. I just want to make it clear that learning Japanese is no different from acquiring other skills. It has its challenges, but also requires the same set of traits to acquire knowledge, traits that I believe anyone can obtain. So, before even delving into the details, there are 3 key things that you must understand to make any part of this routine work. Firstly, the process of selecting the right tools and finding a method that works for you requires time, often a substantial amount. It's possible that during this time you might barely make any progress in learning Japanese. This is a common experience. I wanted to emphasize it because there is a recent trend on claiming how quickly someone learns something without considering the time invested before reaching their milestone. The 1, 2, or 3 years claim might actually represent a longer period, and it's important not to disregard the value of failure. You will encounter setbacks, so don't be alarmed if after a couple of months you find yourself deviating from your daily learning routine, switching methods, or even starting from scratch again. It's all okay, and each experience is adding to the knowledge you are accumulating. Now, at some point you will need to commit. Unfortunately, you won't find answers for all your questions unless you actually start trying things yourself. Secondly, and really important, learning a language takes time, a long time. I'll go as far as saying that unless you have specific motives, such as immigration process or job requirements, there is no need to rush the learning journey. Furthermore, setting a definitive endpoint for when you'll be done learning is counterproductive. It's better if you start just by enjoying the journey. While it might sound cliche, everyone fails at it. And because I know that most of you are doing this out of pure love for Japanese culture or language learning, maybe it's better for you to accept this. Consider setting occasional milestones and enjoy the learning process. But don't forget that discipline is key. It's better to do small chunks of daily effort than trying to binge Japanese in a month out of pure motivation. Thirdly, what works for me might not necessarily work for you. Additionally, the reasons behind my choice of specific tools are varied and too extensive to cover in a single video. For now, I'll focus on outlining what I plan to do, especially for the first couple of years, since this routine will inevitably change at some point. I'll go through Hiragana, Katakana, Kanji, vocabulary, grammar, listening, this one being of more importance, and some, I guess, speaking, and general recommendations. So let's start. Hiragana, Katakana, and Kanji. These are the 3 different sets of characters used for reading in Japanese. The first 2 are the easiest to learn and make up the main Japanese syllabary. In them you'll find all the sounds used by the language. The reason they are super important is that most resources you'll encounter use them from the beginning. Learning Hiragana and Katakana will also allow you to start grasping some grammar patterns. Some people manage to learn them in a day, a week, or a month. It's up to you. To learn these characters there are many efficient ways. I personally choose Japanese Pod 101. They have 2 videos on YouTube, each about an hour long, covering both in an easygoing, super simple yet effective way. Once you completed this, you don't need to drill exercises endlessly until you memorize them by heart, because through the process of using the other steps in this routine, or any other methods you prefer, they will stick to your brain naturally. So don't worry, you can now move forward to Kanji. That said, I did use an app for practice from time to time that is called Kana. You can do reviews there, practice writing and practice recognition explanation, but as I said, just don't worry or stress too much about it. Kanji. Yes, you need to learn kanji. There's no way around. So get over it and start learning. I would say there are many ways to do this, but to be honest, learning kanji is not a difficult task. It just requires a small amount of discipline and addressing it in reasonable chunks. There are various methods, but my chosen method is remembering the kanji. This is a book that presents stories associated to these characters and introduces them progressively through different particles. This approach leads you to associate and memorize them in an easier way. So, is it really that easy? And the answer for me is yes, it is. Despite only teaching you their meanings and not their readings, because each kanji has multiple readings, it's still very effective. Don't worry about the readings because in isolation it's just pointless. You'll understand it once we get to vocabulary. Remember, the kanji can be approached in different ways too. I tried binging it, but I lasted only 3 days because for me it was extremely boring. Instead, I decided to do just 3 kanji a day. I also create physical flashcards, mostly because doing it this way helps me add some extra memories to the process, like my own mistakes while writing the kanji or accidental mnemonics. This creates a solid image to grasp when I'm trying to remember and also allows me to practice writing. By the way, I think writing is not that important, but I like to take physical notes, so for me it's worth it, especially when we get to grammar. Finally, I decided to use Genki, though I have to admit, I freaking hate that app. I really hate how obsessive people are with it. Nevertheless, I have to say it's very effective. In summary, it's an app that you can install on your PC or your phone. It allows you to create decks of flashcards or load pre-made ones and review them on an interval basis, solidifying the process of memorization. I'll talk a bit more about it once we get to vocabulary, but for now, what I do is just to take photos of my 3 cards and add them to a deck that I review daily. The whole process might seem convoluted, but it's actually fairly easy and doesn't take longer than 20 minutes a day. So at this pace, in 2 years, I'll finish the book. Most importantly, because it's not the only thing I'm doing, I won't get sick of it, and I'll be able to learn readings through listening and vocabulary. One more thing about RTK, I will be using its French version. And for that, I thank Jihan from the channel No Friday Night Plans. She showed this version in one of her videos, and I think if you know French, is the way to go. It's a revised version from the original that has stories for all the kanjis included in the book. There is a revised order as well, as different stories in some ways I feel suit better the kanjis, but also they lean more towards the French culture, so you might need to think about it. So far I went through 300 and compared both of them, and I just prefer the French version. Vocabulary. This is probably the biggest chunk to tackle in your language learning journey. You will constantly feel that you don't have enough vocabulary, so I would make this point a priority. Similar to the other steps, there are countless approaches. After trying different ones, I'm going with Anki, especially with the core 2K 6K deck. This is a great way to go through basic vocabulary. There is just one minor issue you might face, but in summary, it's a deck with 6,000 words presented with audio, a phrase to provide context, and finally an image that sometimes doesn't make much sense, but it kinda works. There are also countless of videos explaining how to set up Anki, so I will leave that to yourself. The amount of new words you do daily will vary depending on your own life. In general, I find 5 to 15 to be a sweet range. Initially, I started doing 6 daily new words, and at the time, I was also using another method to get more vocab. Since then, I switched entirely to Anki, and 10 words is what I can handle at the moment, ensuring I have enough time to other activities aside of Japanese. I advise you to start with a lower number and progressively adjust it to your needs. As a warning, don't go too hard on this. Firstly, because even if it takes you only 5 minutes to finish at the beginning, it will eventually become more time consuming as more words will require more reviews, aside of the new ones. Secondly, you need to give time to assimilate vocabulary. It is better to spend extra time with things like listening or reading, places where you can find words in context and help the process of memorization. And thirdly, and related to the minor issue mentioned earlier, well, you will constantly forget words. It is what it is, and my advice is don't be hard on yourself. Sometimes it takes me 5-6 times to memorize a word just to eventually forget it and fail it again, but do not worry, this is normal. In any case, feel free to do whatever you want, but keep in mind that this deck will keep you busy for at least 2 years, so there is no need to speedrun it. Another thing about Anki, I know there are an insane amount of plugins and things and I just can't. The whole Anki makes me kinda sick, so the simpler the better. I advise you to only use the options again and good. When to check one or the other, basically hit good only if you manage to get the correct meaning and reading, otherwise go to again. Sometimes you will feel that it takes forever to remember despite getting both correct. In that situation, I tend to hit again once more. I'm going to get straight to the point. I'm using Busuu. This is not a sponsor, but if anyone at Busuu is watching, you should consider it and maybe lend some discount codes or links or whatever, because I do like your app. In summary, there are many language learning apps and many reviews, and I kinda hate that. However, in the past I've tried a lot of them, and I think Busuu works great as a complementary tool to your studies. Emphasis in complementary. I know there are some negative reviews, but honestly most of them are too old, or they are just people creating fast content on YouTube and they just barely tried a few lessons and are quick to judge in isolation the different apps. I finished their entire French course, and again, as a complementary tool, it was great. That said, I know that French and Japanese are quite different, so I don't expect this app to take me too far, but for starters, it's pretty solid. I've already started my journey through it, and it's mostly positive despite some little issues, but I will not go any further to judge it yet. Right now, Busuu is like a little bit of everything as an app. You have some vocabulary, grammar, and a small part of writing or speaking exercises. Again, I'm not asking from the app to solve all my problems. Instead, it is sort of like a roadmap to follow in the earlier stages. Once I'm done with it, maybe I'll post a review about it. Busuu might not be enough. So, at certain moments, I also tend to go to YouTube to get more thorough explanations. There are plenty of people already explaining all the topics there, and I can't list them all, but I would like to give a shout out to Matt from Game Gengo. It's an incredibly useful YouTube channel. Honestly, it's a must-see. Matt does so much work explaining things, and for those who love video games, this is also a place to go. With grammar, I'm not being too strict, so I'm allocating around 20 minutes to this in the daily routine. There are also books and websites, some more famous than others, and I'm just not a fan of them, but I will still add them in the description. And even if I said that I won't be too strict, please don't sleep on grammar, since it will add more knowledge gains from the other steps, especially from the next one, and you will definitely notice. Now, memorization requires time and context, not just Anki and apps, so for that reason I think it's super important to engage in listening or immersion, call it whatever you want. There is beginner content available. I've listened to Teppei and Noriko along with a bunch of other YouTubers and podcasters. I'll list some of them in the description. The thing is, all this content for beginners is great, but it's not my main way to go. I find it boring to listen to random stuff that doesn't appeal to me in any way. Instead, I think you should start consuming content at any level of difficulty in the target language. I have only two conditions for doing it. Watch content that you already consume and that you love. By watching something you already watch, you won't feel the need to understand everything, and you won't feel lost, so you can focus more on the actual Japanese part. And because it's something you love, you will also get a lot of entertainment value and won't see it as a painful task. I always have a bunch of series, movies, and anime that I wanted to rewatch and I didn't have the opportunity. Well, this is the moment to do it. For example, I love Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I've already watched it entirely twice in English and once in French. Now I'm watching it in Japanese, and oh boy, it's always an experience. The same goes for a bunch of other things that I already watched. Easy to binge even if I don't understand everything. Something great about doing it this way is that since I'm learning vocab and kanji, I always end up finding words and patterns in context. That's when I really memorize things, not while spending time on Anki. And I know I said to choose content from any level of difficulty, but as a beginner, I tend to mix things up. So from time to time, watching movies with really basic plot or series with a slice of life approach can help you learn some words faster, especially if you combine them with moments where you use Japanese subtitles versus subtitles in a language you already know. Suddenly things start to click when you turn subtitles in a language you are familiar with. As your journey progresses, spending more and more time in the target language will be more valuable. But even as a beginner, I'm 100% confident that you need to do listening or some type of input to reinforce all the rest. The amount of time spent on this daily honestly depends on your life. At the beginning probably won't be as impactful, but you should try to allocate some time to it every week. Maybe just an hour or two. up to you. I'm not really a fan of being all the time listening to Japanese. That said, I know there is a big community in favor of this type of approach. Honestly, do as you please. As for me, I'll just go chill about it. If I have time or want to listen to something, great. If I don't feel in the mood, then I just won't do it. So as you notice, I focus mostly on listening as input, but eventually, as my vocabulary and comprehension grows, I will start tackling reading in small doses. Books like this one makes introduction of reading very smooth, so maybe you could add this one to the list. Finally, output or speaking. It's probably debatable, but for me, it's not as important right now. It's just a personal way of approaching language learning. In the future, most likely I will use italki. And with italki, I also managed to improve a lot in the past with my French, so when the time comes, that will be my main tool. There are some specifics about how I will approach this on the daily basis that I think you really need to know in order to keep this feasible for a long time. But prior to that, one last important thing that I discovered while making this plan. The Japanese learning community can sometimes be quite toxic. As a piece of advice, don't let others discourage you from trying different approaches. It's essential not to get overly involved in unnecessary discussions. After all, we are all here to learn language, not to solve global issues like climate change. So keep your focus on your learning journey and don't let negativity hinder your progress. In total, this routine will take around an hour or an hour and a half every day, not counting the listening part. Not gonna lie, this won't be possible every day since overall I have a very busy life, so I will be flexible with most of it except vocabulary, since I feel this is the longest one to tackle. But for the rest of the steps, if I have a bad day, I won't push it. So at minimum, I will try to spend 20 minutes a day reviewing vocab. I plan to follow this for around 2 to 3 years, and I'll probably check my progress at the 1-year mark, just to see if I'm maintaining my consistency, but I think in less than 2 years, I won't see any significant progress, and I'm okay with it for now. My expectation is to get to entry around that time. For those who don't know, there is a test, the JLPT, divided in 5 levels. I don't plan to do this test officially. Maybe I will try some mock-up tests, and that's it. Like I mentioned before, I don't pretend to ever finish learning, but for basic levels, the JLPT does present a decent guide to what you should cover. The only reason I want to get to entry is to feel a bit more at ease playing video games in Japanese, as well as reading all types of things. To be honest, mostly manga. I feel that will become a great addition to this routine eventually, adding more variation to the process of learning, but for the moment, that's it.